Mr. Morawiecki. We will start with the brief remarks from both Prime Ministers, and then we will have a short time for questions. Please.
Prime Minister Morawiecki, dear Matthews, I'm so happy that we could finally meet here in Helsinki. Your visit comes after the tragic events of last Tuesday. Once again, I want to express our solidarity for Poland and condolences for the lives lost. We must be very clear. Without Russia's war and targeting of civilians, also innocent Polish civilians would not have died. As we discussed today, we need to do everything we can so that Ukraine prevails. Poland is doing once again more than its part. You are not only giving weapons, helping displaced people from Ukraine and making humanitarian effort, you're also helping others to help Ukraine. Finland does its part too. This week we made the decision to deliver our 10th package of weapons and military equipment to Ukraine. This is the largest delivery up to date of the value of some 55 million euros. More will come. Our message is we will do whatever it takes. We discussed today also means to hold Russia accountable. Russia sees that it can violate international law with total impunity without any concerns about human suffering. We must find ways to make Russia pay for the damages it has caused. The atrocities and crimes committed in Ukraine by Russia will not go unpunished. We also discussed the future membership of Finland and Sweden in NATO. Here as well, I want to thank Poland. You have supported us through the ratification process. With the fast ratification of our NATO membership, Poland has shown also leadership for others. Still, ratification remains. We discussed ways to find coordinated and common solutions to the problems of the energy market as well. We have common interest in forest policy and so many other important areas. There is a lot of potential for more cooperation among us on the EU agenda. So thank you so much for your visit, Mateus, and now the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Madam Prime Minister. Dear Sanna, thank you for your invitation. First of all, I have to emphasize that our countries may lie on opposite sides of the Baltic Sea, but we speak with one voice when it comes to the geopolitical threats, in particular what is happening in Russia, in Ukraine. Both our countries are frontline states against Russia. This is a challenge that cannot be met alone. Recent days have proved that Europe is more united than ever. For the first time, the shockwave of war has reached the territory of the European Union. For 9 months, Russia opened chapter after chapter of its brutal onslaught, shelling hospitals and kindergartens, murdering prisoners of war, and killing civilians. On November 15th, Russia launched a massive missile attack on Ukraine. As a result, 2 Polish citizens were killed. Russia bears full responsibility for this tragic event. Russia is testing our determination, but we do not give in to threats. We do not give in to provocations. We stand shoulder to shoulder with Ukraine. Special times call for special actions. When dozens of missiles are hitting Ukraine, we must hit Russia harder than it might expect. And here I would emphasize in particular one special element which was not yet used, and this is a potential confiscation of Russian assets of Russian Federation and assets of Russian oligarchs. They have to feel the pain of this war. They have to be responsible for this war. Assets cannot only be frozen. Frozen assets can increase in value in due course. We need Russian assets to be dedicated, used to rebuild Ukraine, and they have to feel this pain. Today, the whole world is paying for Russia's aggression, but it is Russia that must pay for all the crimes it has committed. Despite its many losses, Russia is still a huge threat, which is why we need further sanctions. Sanctions are effective and we must develop them, although they are not indifferent to our economies. This is why we also have to be strong, and we have to explain this to everybody, why the inflation, why the energy prices, why the macroeconomic crisis, and we have to speak with one voice here as well. And Sanna and I, we do speak one voice with regard to the prerequisites of this crisis, why this is happening. Ukrainian army is facing a formidable enemy alone, and Ukrainians must be constantly aware that they have Europe's massive support behind them. It's David versus Goliath, and this David has to know that we, the free world, we are going to defend them, and we are also ready to sacrifice more to defend Ukraine, because Ukraine is fighting for our freedom, for our security, and for our prosperity in the future. Poland has no doubt that Georgia 2008 and Crimean Peninsula 2014 was the beginning of a new era in our history. We had no doubt that Russian gas was as dangerous as Russian tanks. We had no doubt that the hybrid attack on the Polish-Belarusian border was a prelude to Russia's actions. Both our countries stand up to those threats. Poland has built a wall on the border with Belarusian regime, and we are going to build a barrier with the Polish-Russian border to Kaliningrad region. And I know Finland is also thinking about some barriers, some walls with Russia as well. The level of political class can be seen in moment of threat, moment of crisis. This is why it's so important how we, the European Council, the European Union, react to what is happening in Ukraine. A united society and united politicians is the great strength of any nation. The security of our border is not a local issue. It has a global dimension. NATO is the most powerful defense alliance in history, but the strength rests on the strength and solidarity of all the states. And this is why it's so important that Sweden and Finland joins NATO so quickly, and we fully support your efforts in joining NATO, Sanna, and we will do utmost to convince all those who have not yet ratified their legislation about Finland's accession to NATO. The Russians want to break the Ukrainians in order to open the way to Europe. So the Russian bear was stopped by the Ukrainians, but we need to weaken modern history that knew how to use winter against Russia, and this was Finland some decades ago. The Finns understand the Eastern threat much better than Western countries, and I believe that they know how to unite against it. I therefore thank you, Madam Prime Minister, so much for being partners in this fight for Europe's security, in this fight for Europe's future. We must fend off Russian threats and cruelty once and for all. We can do this only when we are united and if we are focused on key geopolitical risks and dangers, and all the secondary issues of yesterday are put aside. Together we are stronger, and together we are safer, and together we can achieve more. Thank you, Sanna.
Thank you. We move on to questions. Please.
Hi, my name is Karol Darmoros. I'm from the Polish radio. So, a question to Prime Minister Marin. Following NATO's Secretary General visit to Turkey and your government talks with Ankara, do you see any potential breakthrough regarding Finnish accession to NATO? And to Prime Minister Morawiecki, do you plan to talk with Prime Minister Orban to speed up the ratification process? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. There's yet 2 countries remaining of the ratification. Those are Hungary and Turkey. And of course, we are discussing both countries and wishing for very fast ratification. Hungary has before said that they will ratify this year. Now there is some questions, will this happen this year or early next year? But of course we hope that Hungary will ratify Finland and Sweden's NATO application as soon as possible. We're also discussing with Turkey, and Turkey has said also out loud publicly that they don't have that many issues with Finland, but some concerns when it comes to Sweden. But from our perspective, it's also very important that we will enter NATO together. We applied together, so it's very important that we will also be accepted and ratified together as well, because we are sharing the same security situation. We are sharing the same security geopolitical atmosphere. So of course it will be very important that we will be accepted together.
In a couple of days, Prime Minister Orban and I are going to meet in the format of Visegrad Group format, and I'm sure that together with our friends from Slovakia and the Czech Republic, we will be asking Viktor Orban for his quick ratification agreement, legislation vis-à-vis Finland and Sweden, of course, as well, because we believe that this is critically important to increase the security of eastern flank of NATO and security of our region.
Next question.
Finnish national broadcaster YLE Terhi Toivonen, question for Prime Minister Morawiecki about this stray anti-aircraft missile. What new can you tell us about the investigation, and perhaps has Ukraine agreed or said that it was their missile?
Well, no, not yet, and let all the prosecutors and all the experts work on this. We have invited Ukrainian experts to the investigation, and we have also invited international American NATO experts to this investigation as well. We have some evidence. We have gathered some evidence in the form of some films from the cameras of border guards, but they are not indicating with 100% certainty at where the missile was fired from. So we still have to gather new evidence, and the investigation will last for a little while. We want it to be as transparent as possible, and in particular, we want our Ukrainian friends and partners to be convinced and sure that the version is certain. So we invited their experts for this investigation too.
Next question from the second row.
Grzegorz Urbanek from TV Polsat. I have a question to Finnish and Polish prime ministers. I'd like to ask you about common points before the European Union summit. I ask about economic and energy issues points, and the second question, the Finnish Prime Minister, about the idea to build a border barrier on the border of Russia. Could you tell us more details about this project? Thank you.
Well, if I will start about the border, of course we are working together with our border guards, and they have said very clearly that they would need this kind of fence to the Finnish border to help them to surveil better the border in the future. We have had good cooperation with Russian border guards as well so far, but we are also looking at the future, and our border guards think, and our border control thinks and says that we need this kind of fence to make sure that we can surveil the whole border without any problems in the future. So we will now provide the funds to do this, and we will start building the fence next year. About the upcoming European Council meeting, I think what Mateus previously said and what we discussed today, it's very important that we could use the funds that are now frozen from Russia and from Russian oligarchs to help Ukraine. I think it would also send a very clear signal that when Russia attacks Ukrainian critical infrastructure, they also have to pay the damages. So I think it's very important that we would find the legal solution to use these frozen assets, these frozen funds, to help Ukraine. I think there are several billion euros of frozen funds. So I think this should be our key priority, and we are in the same page with this, and I think it would be very important that the Commission would find the legal base to do this.
So building on what Sanna just said, I would add to this that both Sanna and myself, we are of the same view that all the current implications to our economies, to our societies, are direct consequence of the Russian attack on Ukraine, energy crisis, and inflation because of energy crisis. And we know that we have to reply appropriately through our own domestic systems, monetary policy, financial, fiscal policy, regulatory policy, and this is our duty. We were already making some consolidation of our public finances. We are very conservative in our approach here, and we see some good results. And also the other parts of the macroeconomic policy are doing their part, regulatory policy, regulators, monetary policy, central bank, and so on. We see what the European Central Bank is doing, and we align to this accordingly. I mean Poland, because Finland is in Eurozone. So from this point of view, we know how to react. The biggest unknown is, of course, what is going to happen in Ukraine. And this is why it's so important to stand firm on behalf of Ukraine and behind Ukraine to help them win this brutal war with Russia.
And the final question.
Lauri Nurmi, Iltalehti Finland. A question for Prime Minister Morawiecki. Poland has taken millions of war refugees. At the moment, also weapon deliveries to Ukraine go through Poland. Is Poland committed to accepting war refugees and supplying weapons to Ukraine? And a question for both of you, Prime Ministers. Russia is destroying Ukraine's infrastructure and targeting civilians by purpose. Is Vladimir Putin a war criminal? Thank you.
Well, it's certain that there is war crimes happening in Ukraine as we speak, targeting civilians, destroying, demolishing critical infrastructure, energy infrastructure, and also this way targeting civilians. It's wrong. These are war crimes, and we have to make sure that the ones responsible, especially Vladimir Putin, that it's behind this war, are held accountable. We have to make sure that the international community condemns these actions, and we have to make sure that Ukraine will win the war and also help Ukraine build its country, rebuild its country after the war and also during the war. And that's why the frozen assets that we could use are so important, that we could find this way also the monetary help to Ukraine to build, for example, this critical infrastructures once again. The other question that you asked with Morawiecki was concerning
Weapon deliveries.
Weapon delivery. There's a point that I want to say. I think we also have to show solidarity towards Poland and other neighboring countries of Ukraine. I think this isn't a situation that should only concern certain countries, but this concerns all of Europe. So I think it's very important that all of us are supporting Poland, but also other neighboring countries when it comes to for war refugees or otherwise the situation. We have to show solidarity and unity from this perspective as well as whole EU.
Well, like what might be the next plan of the Kremlin and Putin is to destroy all the infrastructure, public utility infrastructure, water, sanitation, energy infrastructure in particular, with his hope, to actually change the mood of the public opinion and destroy the morale of the Ukrainian nation, which is so bravely defending Europe and defending its sovereignty and its territorial integrity. And our duty is to help them to counteract those attacks and to help the Ukrainian population as much as we can. Now is the question how to help them. First, through financial support so that the Ukrainian government can pay for salaries, because 30 plus million people still living in Ukraine, in Ukrainian villages, in Ukrainian cities, and they have to have money. Tax gathering in such circumstances, you can imagine, is very low. So on the one hand, Sana and myself and refugees, you asked about refugees, sir. Poland has accepted and accommodated some 2 million of Ukrainian refugees. They are still living in Poland on the same footing with the Polish citizens, access to healthcare system, educational system, and so on. And we count with another wave of refugees because the winter can force people out of their homes and they can move to people. In those circumstances, I think that the European Commission and their thinking should be based more on solidarity with Poland and Slovakia and other countries which are going to absorb most of those refugees, because the first wave, of refugees, was accommodated by Poland, but with relatively little help by the European Commission. Or very little help if I compare the cost with the support. So that's about the current situation, and we have to think about the worst scenario as well. Hope for the best, but prepare for the worst, and this is what we are doing right now, and we have to do so.
Thank you, Prime Ministers. Thank you. All the press conference has ended.
Thank you.
Thank you.